Welcome in, everyone. Let's dive deep into the world of John D. Rockefeller. We're using Ron Chernow's Titan to guide us, going past those robber baron headlines to really get who this guy was. You all had some interesting points from the book, so let's get right to it.
Chernow paints a great picture of where Rockefeller came from, and it all starts with his dad, William Avery Rockefeller, or as he was called, Devil Bill.
Devil Bill. Now, that's a name that makes you wonder, right? You pointed out how Chernow describes him. Fast-talking huckster, fugitive, not exactly what you picture for, like a pillar of the community. What struck you about that?
Oh, the guy was unbelievably bold. Chernow talks about him just taking off for months, families on their own, then he reappears like nothing happened. There's even a bit about him tossing pebbles at the window to say he's back.
Like a signal?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of funny, but also unsettling when you think about it.
And it wasn't just a one-time thing either. Multiple families call himself Dr. Livingston sometimes. The guy was a master of deception. It makes you wonder how all that affected John D. Rockefeller growing up.
Absolutely. Chernow seems to say John D. got his business smarts from his dad, but was also really bothered by how unstable and, well, morally shady the guy was. Like, he was both drawn to and kind of grossed out by what his father was.
That inner push and pull seems to come up a lot in the book. But it's not just family stuff. This ties into big names like Ida Tarbell.
Right. Can't talk Rockefeller without Tarbell coming up. Her takedown of Standard Oil, that was huge in bringing it down. And it gets even more interesting when you look at her own history with Rockefeller.
You pointed out where Chernow talks about Tarbell's father, oil producer, forced out by the South Improvement Company, which, as we know, Rockefeller was part of. That's got to be some serious motivation for revenge.
It goes beyond just being a good reporter at that point, doesn't it? Chernow makes it clear how much those articles got to Rockefeller, especially how she wrote about his dad. It's like he could handle people criticizing his business, but family stuff, that was different.
It makes you think about how powerful stories are. Tarbell, she made Rockefeller out to be this heartless guy who ruined her family, and people believed it. It's interesting how those two sides, his and hers, got so intertwined.
And it shows how complex Rockefeller was, because while he's building this empire, he's also giving away tons of money. Even as a teenager, he was donating part of his earnings. That's where Chernow brings this idea of stewardship.
You mark that part about Rockefeller believing rich people are just like temporary caretakers of God's money. Interesting concept. Was he for real, or was that just him justifying all the money and power he had?
It might have been both, honestly. Chernow quotes him saying philanthropy gave him the, and I quote, inner license to go after wealth so aggressively. Kind of chilling when you think that doing good might have just been his way of dealing with any guilt he had about how he got there.
That's something historians still go back and forth on. But let's break that down a bit more. On one side, we've got Rockefeller, the ruthless businessman who crushed his rivals. But then we've also got this super religious guy, devout Baptist, all about his family, doing more philanthropy than anyone has seen before. It's wild, right? Almost like he was really strict in his own life, careful with every penny. But in the oil business, anything went. Chernow even mentions he liked simple things, gardening, taking naps. Not exactly the image of a cutthroat tycoon.
And that's what makes him so fascinating. He's not an easy guy to figure out. It wasn't just about the money, It's like he needed things to be in order, under control. That played out in his life, his work, everything.
You mark this one part. Chernow talks about how Rockefeller dealt with competitors. Join Standard Oil or be crushed. He had a system even. Running arrangements, I think he called them. Basically, if you agreed to produce less, he'd guarantee your profits. Sounds kind of like, I don't know, a nicer version of how the mob operates.
Right. Control the market, that was the idea. And you got to remember, the oil business back then, it was like the Wild West. Chaotic, everyone out for themselves. Rockefeller, for all his flaws, he saw how important stability was.
But didn't he get that stability by doing some pretty messed up things? Chernow goes into how Standard Oil, because they were so big, they got special treatment from railroads, even got discounts on their rivals' shipments.
Different times, different rules, I guess. Stuff we'd say is wrong today. That was just how it was back then. Rockefeller, he used every trick in the book, pushed every limit, all to build his empire. By the 1870s, think about this, Standard Oil, they controlled almost 90% of oil refining in America. That kind of power. People are going to notice.
And not just notice. People were pissed. Newspapers called him the Mephistopheles of Cleveland. Talk about a bad reputation. But here's the interesting part. While his image is getting trashed in public, he starts giving away his fortune like crazy.
Now this is where it gets good. Was he trying to buy back some good PR, shut people up? Or was it, like some folks say, that he actually wanted to do some good in the world?
You marked the part where he starts the University of Chicago, puts money into medical research, even launched a whole thing to get rid of hookworm down south. This wasn't just him writing a check and calling it a day. He was seriously invested in this stuff.
And we got to remember how religious he was. Philanthropy, to him, that was stewardship, using his wealth for God's purpose, basically.
So which one was he? Ruthless robber baron or a saintly philanthropist?
Yeah.
Seems like he was both, which is what makes him so interesting, even today.
Totally. And that complexity, it shows up in his family life, too. Remember how much pressure John D. Rockefeller Jr. felt? Living up to his dad's name, that was a lot to handle.
Oh, man. That story about Junior rebuilding their mansion just to impress his dad kind of breaks your heart, you know? All that weight of expectation carrying on the family legacy.
It wasn't just about being successful either. It was about fixing the family name, showing that their money could do good. The Ludlow Massacre in 1914, that really changed how Junior saw things.
You marked that section. Pretty heavy stuff. For those who haven't heard of it, Ludlow was this awful clash. Coal miners on strike. Things go bad with the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, which is owned by, you guessed it, the Rockefellers.
It was a terrible thing. Showed how bad working conditions were back then, how far companies would go to stop workers from getting a fair shake. Chernow, he describes it all. The shooting, the tents on fire, women and children hiding, hoping they wouldn't get killed. Industrialization had a dark side, that's for sure.
And for Junior, that was like a slap in the face.
Yeah.
He realized all that money, built by workers, it also caused this. Seems like that's when things really changed for him.
He became this big voice for workers' rights, better conditions, even supported unions. That didn't make his dad happy, by the way.
Talk about a change of heart. Going from trying to please your dad with a fancy house to fighting him on how he did business. That's huge.
It shows how Junior's own sense of responsibility grew. He didn't just want the money, he wanted to make the world a better place with it.
And don't forget, all this is happening while there's a big legal battle brewing. The Sherman Antitrust Act, they made that to break up monopolies, just like Standard Oil. That's when the government finally said, okay, Rockefeller, enough is enough.
Big turning point, not just for them, but for America. The Sherman Act, that showed the government was starting to put its foot down when it came to giant businesses.
But Rockefeller, he didn't just give up, right? Chernow says he dissolved the Standard Oil Trust, made it seem like a bunch of separate companies so he could dodge the law.
Smart move, but it couldn't last. In 1911, Supreme Court ruled against him, said Standard Oil was a monopoly, had to be broken up.
So that's it then, right? Supreme Court says broke it up, Standard Oil's done. Big loss for Rockefeller.
You'd think, wouldn't you? But here's the thing. It actually made him richer.
Hold on, seriously. How is that even possible?
So all those smaller companies that came out of Standard Oil, Exxon, Mobil, those names ring a bell. They became huge on their own. And Rockefeller. He still had stock. His money, it multiplied.
Wow. Talk about dodging a bullet, huh?
Yeah.
More like they tried to cut him down and he just grew back stronger.
Exactly. Shows you, even when it looks like he's down, Rockefeller always seems to land on his feet.
So what's he do? Empire's gone, at least on paper, but he's got more money than ever.
Yeah.
What's next for John D?
Chernow calls it semi-retirement. Golf, took up photography, all that good stuff. But that philanthropy never really stopped.
You pointed out that how he did philanthropy changed later on. What was different?
He took a step back, let his people, the ones actually running his foundations, do their thing. The Rockefeller Foundation, that became a big deal during this time.
So instead of being so hands-on, he's thinking long-term now, right? Building something that'll last longer than him.
Exactly. And it wasn't just his own organizations. He was like the OG philanthropy guru. Guys like Andrew Carnegie, they'd go to him for advice on how to use their money right.
Wow. From Devil Bill's kid to the guy giving advice on giving back millions. What a story.
It really is something. We've covered it all, haven't we? His crazy upbringing, Standard Oil, his son, all that giving he did. And the thing is, there are no easy answers with Rockefeller. Was he a good guy, bad guy? He was both. And that's what makes him so interesting to learn about.
Yeah. And sure now, he lays it all out there, but he doesn't tell you what to think. Up to us to decide. That's what I love about this show.
Me too. Titan, it's like a starting point. Now it's up to you all listening to keep digging, read more, don't just take our word for it, figure out John D. Rockefeller for yourself.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So until next time, keep exploring.